mother's desperate plea, a rare moment in the wild. The golden sun stretched its arms across the African savanna, painting the sky in soft hues of amber and rose. Near a quiet watering hole, a young lion cub named Quito pounced playfully around his mother, Amara, his tiny paws kicking up dust. Life had been simple, safe, but that morning, curiosity took hold. Quito's eyes locked onto an ancient baobab tree, its rough bark calling him like a challenge waiting to be conquered. With a playful flick of his tail, he began his climb, his small claws gripping tightly. But then, crack, a brittle branch gave way. Quito plunged toward the earth, his mother's roar shattering the morning stillness. Would she find a way to save him? Would nature allow her to defy its cruel laws? Little did she know, her only hope lay with the most unlikely of saviors, humans. Amara's heart pounded as she reached her cub, his small body sprawled in the tall grass. Quito whimpered, his golden fur speckled with dust, his tiny chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. She nudged him gently, urging him to stand, but his back leg buckled, collapsing beneath him. A deep ache spread through her chest. In the wild, injuries like this could mean the difference between life and death. Predators lurked everywhere. Hyenas, leopards, even rival lions. The law of the land was cruel. The weak were left behind. But not today. Amara made a choice that defied instinct, defied everything nature had taught her. She gently grasped Quito by the scruff of his neck, lifting him with the care only a mother could give. Her muscles strained as she carried him forward, moving away from the safety of the trees, away from the familiar sense of home. She was walking toward the unknown, toward danger. Hours passed. The sun, once golden and warm, now burned a deep orange against the horizon. The air grew thick with dust as Amara pushed forward, her body exhausted, but her resolve unshaken. Then she saw them, humans. A dark green Jeep rumbled across the dry earth, its tires crunching against gravel. Inside, a seasoned ranger named Daniel Monroe sat behind the wheel, his sharp eyes scanning the savannah. He had spent decades in this land, learning its rhythms, reading its unspoken language. But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw next. A lioness, approaching, carrying a cub. His grip tightened on the wheel. Every instinct screamed danger. A lioness this close to humans was unheard of. His team tensed, their hands hovering near tranquilizer rifles. But then, something stopped him. The way she moved, slow, deliberate, cautious, but pleading. She reached the Jeep, carefully laying Quito on the ground. Then she stepped back, and in her golden eyes, Daniel saw something that sent chills down his spine. She was asking for help. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. A wild lioness, standing just feet away, watching him with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. His pulse pounded as he met her gaze. Not a challenge, not a threat, but something far more unsettling. A plea. For years he had studied these creatures, memorized their behavior, understood their instincts. And yet what he was witnessing defied everything he thought he knew. Lions didn't seek human help. They didn't surrender their young. But here she was, her golden eyes locked onto his, silently begging him to do something. The team remained frozen, their hands hovering near their gear. One wrong move, one sudden action, and this moment of fragile trust could shatter. Slowly, Daniel raised his hands, palms open, a universal sign of peace. The mother lion didn't flinch. Instead, she let out a deep, guttural sound. Not a roar, but something softer, more desperate. Daniel exhaled. If they didn't act now, the cub's fate was sealed. He motioned for his medic, a young woman named Sarah, to move in. Every step she took felt like a gamble, like walking a razor's edge between life and death. But the lioness remained still, her muscles tense but her instincts restrained. Daniel could feel it. She was fighting every natural urge that told her to protect her young, choosing instead to trust. Sarah crouched beside the cub. Keto let out a weak whimper, his small body trembling. She ran her hands gently over his leg, feeling for fractures. No breaks, just deep bruising. That was the good news. The bad news? The swelling was severe, and if they didn't treat it, infection could set in. Daniel reached into the medical kit. The moment he pulled out the antiseptic, the lioness growled, a low, warning rumble. He hesitated. Would she let him do this? Could she? Time was running out, and everyone, man and beast, knew it. Daniel's fingers hovered over the antiseptic bottle. The mother lion's growl wasn't hostile. It was a warning, a reminder that he was treading on sacred ground. One wrong move and centuries of instinct could take over. Sarah glanced at him, her blue eyes filled with both fear and determination. "We have to do this, Daniel," she whispered. He nodded, heart hammering, and slowly twisted the cap. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the air. The lioness tensed, her muscles rippling under her tawny coat. Daniel knew she was watching every move, measuring, deciding. Was he a threat or a savior? With excruciating slowness, he reached for Keto's injured leg. The cub whimpered, his small body flinching at the touch, but he was too weak to resist. Daniel poured a thin stream of antiseptic over the wound. Keto yelped. The lioness lunged forward, just an inch, just enough to send a clear message. "Hurt him, and I will end you." Everyone froze. The air felt electric, charged with something primal. The other rangers instinctively reached for their tranquilizer rifles, but Daniel shot them a look. "Stand down." He turned his attention back to the lioness. "I know," he murmured, his voice barely above a breath. "I know this hurts him, but I swear to you, it's to help." For a moment, time stood still. The savannah was silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. And then she backed away. Daniel let out a slow exhale. That was all the permission he needed. He and Sarah worked quickly, wrapping Keto's leg in soft gauze, securing it just enough to stabilize him. The cub's breathing steadied. The worst was over. Then something even more incredible happened. The lioness stepped forward, not in aggression, not in fear, but in understanding. She sniffed Keto's bandaged leg, then turned her golden eyes back to Daniel. A look of trust, a look of gratitude. Daniel swallowed hard. He'd spent years studying lions, but today he'd witnessed something no textbook could explain. For a moment, Daniel forgot to breathe. The lioness, this wild, untamed force of nature, was staring straight into him, not with the cold calculation of a predator, but with something else. Recognition, trust. Sarah wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, her hands still trembling from the intensity of the moment. "Did that just happen?" she whispered. Daniel barely nodded. He had spent decades in the field, but nothing had ever come close to this. He had seen lions hunt, fight, even mourn their dead. But to seek help, to understand, that was something else entirely. But it wasn't over yet. Keto, now stabilized, let out a soft mewl and tried to shift his weight. His bandaged leg quivered beneath him. He was still weak, still vulnerable. If he couldn't walk, he wouldn't survive. Daniel knew that, and the mother lion knew it too. She stepped forward, her massive frame casting a long shadow over her cub. Keto looked up at her, his tiny body shivering. She nuzzled him gently, pressing her nose against his forehead, urging him, "Stand up, my son." Keto struggled, his small paws pressing into the dirt. His back leg wobbled, his muscles tensed. He let out a small whimper but tried again and again. The rangers watched in complete silence. No one dared to speak, to breathe too loudly, as the little cub fought against his own pain. Then he stood. It was shaky, unsteady. His back leg buckled slightly, but he didn't fall. A deep rumbling sound escaped the lioness, soft, approving. She stepped beside him, pressing her body close for support. Daniel exhaled, his chest tight with something he couldn't quite name. Relief, pride, awe. The mother lion turned back to him one last time. Their eyes met. No sound, no movement, just a silent understanding. Then with Keto leaning against her, she turned toward the horizon, toward home, toward survival. And just like that, they were gone. The grass swayed gently in the warm African breeze as Daniel stood frozen, watching the mother lion and her cub disappear into the golden haze of the savannah. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from something far deeper, a connection, a moment that defied nature's unspoken rules. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Did you see that?" she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel didn't answer. He just nodded, his eyes locked on the distant figures fading into the wilderness. They had done it. The other rangers, who had remained tense and ready throughout the ordeal, slowly began to relax. Some exchanged quiet glances, still trying to process what they had just witnessed. They had expected chaos, a confrontation, maybe even a tragic ending, but instead they had seen something almost miraculous. Daniel turned back toward the patrol vehicle. His boots crunched against the dry earth, but his mind was miles away. He had seen countless lion encounters over the years, some brutal, some awe-inspiring, but never had he seen one where the boundaries between human and beast dissolved so effortlessly. As he climbed into the Jeep, the radio crackled to life. "Daniel, what's your status? Do you copy?" He hesitated, still caught in the weight of the moment, then pressed the receiver. "We're clear," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "The cub's been treated. They're heading back into the wild." A brief silence on the other end. Then, "Did you just say the lioness brought her cub to you?" Daniel exchanged a glance with Sarah, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," he said, "she did." The disbelief in the ranger's voice was almost comical. "You're kidding." Daniel leaned back in his seat, staring at the horizon where the lions had vanished. "No," he murmured, "I wish I were." For a long moment, no one spoke. The savannah stretched out before them, unchanged, eternal. But Daniel knew better. Something had changed, and it wasn't just the lions. It was him. The sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the savannah. Daniel sat in the Jeep, hands still gripping the wheel, his mind replaying every second of what had just happened. A lioness, the apex predator of the wild, had placed her trust, not in nature, not in fate, but in humans. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't have happened, but it had. Sarah sat beside him, staring blankly at the open land where the lions had disappeared. "Do you think she'll bring him back?" she asked, her voice quiet, almost reverent. Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "she won't need to." Because the cub had stood, he had leaned against his mother, but he had stood. That meant survival. That meant they would make it. And yet something inside Daniel longed to see them again. Not as a ranger, not as a protector of the land, but as someone who had been changed. The radio crackled. "Daniel, we need you back at base. There's a herd of elephants moving toward the west gate. Possible poachers in the area. Business as usual." The wild never paused, never took a breath. And yet, for the first time in his long career, Daniel hesitated. He glanced one last time toward the fading horizon, as if expecting to see a golden figure standing there, watching. Nothing. Just the rustling grass and the endless, untamed beauty of the African wilderness. He sighed, gripping the wheel tighter, then turned the Jeep toward base. But deep down, he knew, somewhere out there, beyond the hills, a mother lion was watching over her cub. And for the first time in history, she had learned that not all humans were the enemy. And maybe, just maybe, humans had something to learn from her too. Jack's journey with Ranger teaches us a powerful lesson about commitment, resilience, and the unexpected paths life takes us on. Sometimes we don't choose our purpose, it finds us. Jack never set out to become a guardian for wolves, just as many of us don't plan for the challenges that reshape our lives. Yet through love, sacrifice, and the kindness of a community, he built something bigger than himself. Life often tests us with obstacles that seem impossible. But when we fight for what truly matters, with heart, with purpose, we don't just survive, we transform. And sometimes in saving others, we find ourselves.